When a major conflict breaks out, the new rules don't start with a knock on your door. They start with a subtle change in what you can actually buy and keep. Suddenly, the 3-year supply of rice and the fuel drums in your garage aren't just supplies, they're considered high-risk assets that the system wants to track. The shift from abundance to a restricted wartime reality is usually triggered by a massive ripple in global logistics. When supply lines for raw materials are cut, the goods we take for granted become the most scrutinized items on the map. This isn't just about empty shelves. It's about a fundamental change in how the resources already in your home are viewed by the outside world. If you've spent years building a stockpile, you need to understand the scientific and practical limits of these goods under pressure. Knowing how these items behave when they are no longer available is the core of real-time survival. Bulk grains like rice, wheat, and beans are usually the first to be flagged because they represent long-term caloric independence. These items are the backbone of any survival pantry, but they are also the most difficult to hide due to their weight and physical volume. In a restricted environment, owning 500 pounds of grain can make you a statistical outlier in local resource data. From a nutritional standpoint, these staples provide the complex carbohydrates needed for high-stress physical labor. However, their visibility is their greatest weakness, making low-profile storage methods more important than the total volume of the food itself. Salt and sugar are often overlooked, but during a crisis, they become high-value restricted commodities due to their role in food preservation. Salt is chemically essential for maintaining electrolyte balance and curing meats, while sugar provides a quick metabolic boost in freezing conditions. Historically, these two items have been more valuable than gold during wartime because they allow you to extend the life of fresh food. If you can't buy them in bulk anymore, your existing supply becomes a finite biological battery for your family. Managing these minerals with precision is a scientific necessity for long-term health when the supply chain halts. Cooking oils and fats are another category where the new rules apply quickly, as they are both calorie-dense and prone to oxidation. Once the flow of vegetable oils is restricted, you are forced to deal with the chemistry of rancidity, which can turn a valuable resource into a health hazard. Unlike grains, fats have a ticking clock that requires you to understand temperature control and oxygen exposure to keep them viable. In a restricted scenario, you can't just replace a spoiled bottle of oil, so preservation becomes as critical as the initial acquisition. Learning to render animal fats or press nuts for oil is the logical next step for self-sufficiency. Fuel is perhaps the most volatile restricted item, both physically and legally, because it powers everything from generators to transport. When gasoline and diesel are rationed, the chemistry of fuel degradation becomes your biggest enemy as modern ethanol-blended fuels break down in months. Without stabilizers, that 50-gallon drum in your shed could become a gummed-up liability just when you need it most. You have to treat every drop as a precious unit of work potential rather than just a liquid. Understanding the physics of fuel sipping and prioritizing energy-intensive tasks is the only way to make a limited stockpile last through a winter. Propane and natural gas are often managed through centralized grids or mandatory tank refills, making them very easy for authorities to meter. If you rely on a large propane tank for heating, a restricted environment might mean you are only allowed a fraction of your usual winter usage. This forces a shift toward the science of thermal insulation and localized heating, such as room-within-a-room strategies to conserve BTUs. You have to stop thinking about heating an entire house and start thinking about the physics of maintaining your core body temperature. Small, portable stoves and high-efficiency heaters become the primary tools for surviving a restricted energy cycle. Medical supplies, specifically antibiotics and advanced wound care items, are typically the first things redirected to the front lines. In a wartime scenario, the new rules might restrict the private sale of these items to ensure military hospitals have what they need. If you have a medical stockpile, you are essentially holding a private pharmacy that cannot be replenished once it is used. This requires a deep understanding of dosage, shelf life extensions, and the biology of infection to avoid wasting a single pill. When professional medical help is prioritized for others, your knowledge of first aid science is the only thing standing between a minor injury and a fatal one. Ammunition And reloading supplies like primers and powder are often reclassified as sensitive materials almost immediately during a conflict. While many focus on the number of rounds they have, the science of defensive posture suggests that conservation is more important than total volume. In a restricted environment, every shot fired is a resource that may never be replaced, changing how you approach home security and hunting. You have to move away from the volume of fire, mindset, and toward precision and deterrent-based strategies. The goal is to maintain your inventory as a last resort while using psychological and physical barriers to avoid the need for it. Batteries and portable power stations are critical for maintaining a communications and lighting edge when the grid is restricted. However, the lithium-ion and lead-acid chemistries in these devices have specific discharge cycles that must be managed to prevent total battery failure. If you can't buy new batteries, you become an amateur electrical engineer, focusing on vampire loads and maximizing the efficiency of every watt. Solar recharging becomes a scientific necessity, but you must also account for the visible signature of panels on your roof. Balancing the need for power with the need to remain inconspicuous is a delicate logistical dance under the new rules. Water filtration is a scientific bridge that allows you to bypass restrictions on bottled water or municipal supply shutoffs. While the system might limit how much water you can store, it is much harder for them to limit your ability to process it yourself. Gravity-fed ceramic filters and UV purification tools are essential because they don't rely on the external supply chain to function. You have to understand the microbiology of your local water sources to ensure you aren't just filtering out dirt while leaving behind dangerous pathogens. In a world of restricted stockpiles, the ability to create potable water on demand is vastly superior to having 1,000 plastic bottles. Seeds and gardening tools are often forgotten in the initial panic, but they represent the only long-term way to grow your way out of a restriction. During major wars, victory gardens were encouraged, but modern rules might require you to register your yield or use specific approved seeds. Keeping a diverse cache of heirloom seeds allows you to maintain nutritional variety that the standard ration pack simply won't provide. The science of soil health and composting becomes your primary production line, turning waste into high-calorie vegetables. If the stockpile is capped, the garden becomes your unregulated black market for vitamins and minerals. Hygiene products like soap, bleach, and alcohol are essential for preventing the spread of disease, which often kills more people than conflict does. When these items are restricted, you have to understand the chemistry of sanitation to keep your environment biosecure with very few resources. Something as simple as a bar of soap or a bottle of isopropyl alcohol becomes a life-saving tool when medical facilities are overwhelmed. Learning how to make your own soap from ash and fat isn't just a pioneer skill, it's a way to maintain health when the stores are empty. Sanitation is the silent pillar of survival that most people ignore until the first outbreak happens. Coffee, tea, and tobacco are categorized as luxuries, but they are scientifically proven to be powerful morale boosters and effective barter items. In a high-stress wartime environment, these stimulants can help maintain mental focus and provide a sense of normalcy when everything else is chaos. Because they are often imported, they're among the first items to vanish from shelves and become highly regulated. A small, hidden supply of these items can be exchanged for essential services or physical goods that you might have missed in your initial prep. They aren't just for consumption, they are a secondary form of currency in a world where paper money is failing. Canned goods are the signature item of any prepper, but they are also the most obvious target for a resource audit or inspection. The new rules might specify a maximum number of commercial units a household is allowed to keep to prevent what authorities call private hoarding. To stay within these limits while staying fed, you have to prioritize nutrient-dense cans like meats and fats over low-calorie soups. Understanding the science of best buy dates versus actual spoilage allows you to rotate your stock effectively without wasting resources. It's about getting the most biological bang for your buck out of every square inch of shelf space. Animal feed is a massive logistical burden that often gets restricted to prioritize human consumption during a grain shortage. If you keep livestock or even pets, the new rules might make it impossible to buy the bulk bags of kibble or grain you're used to. This forces a shift toward forage-based feeding or utilizing kitchen scraps to keep your animals alive and producing. The science of animal nutrition becomes vital here, as you need to know which local plants can provide the protein and minerals your livestock need to thrive. If you can't feed your animals, they transition from being a resource to being a liability very quickly. Clothing and textiles are rarely thought of as stockpiles, but in a long-term conflict, the ability to replace worn-out gear disappears. You have to treat your current wardrobe as a finite resource, focusing on the physics of layering and the chemistry of fiber repair to stay warm and dry. High-quality wool and synthetic insulators are scientifically superior to cotton in survival situations, but they also require specific care to maintain their loft and waterproofness. Learning basic tailoring and cobbling isn't just about fashion. It's about preventing exposure and foot injuries when there are no more boots to buy. Your gear needs to last as long as the conflict does. The psychology of scarcity is perhaps the most difficult rule to navigate, as it changes how you interact with your neighbors and community. When everyone around you is living on rations, your stockpile, no matter how small, can make you a target for resentment or reporting. The science of human behavior suggests that under high stress, people will trade their long-term values for short-term survival, meaning your privacy is your best defense. You must learn to look like you are struggling just as much as everyone else to avoid drawing unwanted attention. This social camouflage is just as important as the locks on your pantry door. Communication tools like radios and scanners are often restricted to prevent the spread of unauthorized information or coordination outside of official channels. However, staying informed about local conditions and resource distribution points is a scientific necessity for navigating the crisis. You have to understand the physics of radio waves and antenna placement to listen in without broadcasting your own location to monitoring equipment. Having a diversity of analog tools ensures that you aren't reliant on a digital grid that can be switched off or monitored by those in charge. Information is the one resource that doesn't take up much space, but provides the highest return on investment. Ultimately, surviving under the new rules means moving away from the idea of a static stockpile and toward a dynamic flow of resources. You have to become a producer rather than just a consumer, focusing on skills that allow you to generate what you need from the environment. This scientific approach to self-reliance is the only way to bypass the limits imposed by any authority or emergency decree. The rules are designed to manage the population as a whole, but they can't easily account for an individual who is truly self-sufficient. Your goal is to be the person who has the knowledge to fix, grow, and heal when the systems stop working. Preparing for these restrictions today is the only way to ensure you aren't caught in the net when the next crisis hits. By focusing on high-density nutrition, decentralizing your supplies, and mastering the science of preservation, you can protect your family's future. The world is moving into an era of managed scarcity, and the old ways of prepping are being rewritten by new legal and logistical realities. Stay sharp, focus on the items that offer the most utility, and never let anyone know exactly how much you have in reserve. Your survival depends on your ability to adapt to the rules without being crushed by them. In a world of new rules, do you believe a massive hidden stockpile or the technical skill to produce your own resources is more critical for long-term survival? Share your thoughts in the comments, please.